Good day, everyone. I'm Mary Texeira, and you are tuned into another what we hope is a fascinating discussion after we see an important film today. And we have a panel of experts who are going to guide us afterwards and interpret as well as field questions. So we have a Q&A section at the bottom of your screen. So feel free to ask obviously respectful questions about anything that you see in the film. And what I'd like to do now is, as always, read our land acknowledgement that we do every week. We recognize that California State University San Bernardino sits on the territory and ancestral land of the San Manuel Band of Mission Indians. We recognize that every member of the California State San Bernardino community has benefited and continues to benefit from the use and occupation of this land since the institution's founding in 1965. Consistent with our values of community and diversity, we have a responsibility to acknowledge and make visible the university's relationship to Native peoples. By offering this land acknowledgement, we affirm Indigenous sovereignty and will work to hold California State University San Bernardino more accountable to the needs of American Indian and Indigenous people. And, you know, as we try very, very hard to not make those empty words, but to really sincerely thank our brothers and sisters who are in our community, Native American brothers and sisters, and to work toward their freedom, I guess is the best way to put it. So I think we're okay. You see these beautiful people up on the screen, and we will introduce them, or they will introduce themselves at the other side of the film. So I think we're okay for now. Is everyone ready for the film to start? It's going to be about an hour, and we'll see you on the other side. Thank you. It's heartwarming to know that Canada is the same as the United States, you know, as its northern neighbor, but you know, it's depressing too, because police and government bureaucracy works the same everywhere, I suppose. And one of the things I liked about this film is that it was sort of international in nature. I'm wondering if, you couldn't see. I'm wondering if you all want to, Jacob, would you like to start, since you're the senior in charge here? Don't act like you don't know what I'm talking about. You're an assistant director of diversity and inclusion. That's fantastic. That's fantastic. So you are an expert, but I don't want to put any pressure on you or anything. So tell us all about it, Jacob. No, I'm just, I just really am grateful again that you all are here. And if you could just, do some brief remarks or discuss whatever.
Sure. And I think for myself, Professor Asbell and Eloy, I think we're going to all kind of, have talk story and connect with you all and share, our reactions, and we see some questions coming in the Q&A and we'll address them. I think what I'll share is initially, I had been invited with my colleagues to join this talk, and I was really, a memory flashed in my mind, right? I felt, the words will come to me in English later, so let me share with this experience with you. So I grew up in the Chicago suburbs and grew up in a very conservative Christian family. Many of us in the southern part of Kerala, of India, known as Kerala, has a very high Syrian Orthodox Christian community by way of colonization, by way of spreading religion, et cetera, et cetera. My name, fun fact during introductions, my name is a product of colonization, right? And so I often get those questions. So living with this family, I would remember when families would visit So we'd have extended family or community visit in the summer, and we would take, if you're familiar with Chicago, we have the elevated trains and we would call it the L. And so on the L, during the month of June, we would take our visiting family friends to downtown Chicago to look at the, I still call it the Sears Tower, don't sue me, but it's called something else now. Sears Tower, Navy Pier, go walk through the Magnificent Mile, yada, yada, right? And it's June, and when we would pop past the Belmont stop, which is the Boys Town, or the one of the queer neighborhoods is, and all the people after the Pride Parade would get on the train, and it's rainbow everywhere, right? Rainbow capitalism. We'll get to that. And in the inside of me, like the real person who wants to be out and queer and proud, would glow up. My parents and family members were so uncomfortable, and I was like, yes, this is a win for me. Like, here they are, surrounded by discomfort. And so I had clear expectations of pride. And so seeing all of this love on this train of people being themselves, and this is me as like probably a middle schooler, high schooler. I came to the US at a very young age, at elementary school level. And so in high school, I became very active in LGBTQ spaces. I was still closeted. I was in a lot of activist spaces. And so we organized a lot of the like Day of Silence, Night of Noise. I don't know if anybody here came to the QTRC's program, but those are really for LGBTQ folks who have been silenced and murdered by hate crimes, and we hold remembrance. And I was really, as a closeted person, organizing these marches in downtown Chicago for youth. So I was coming from a very organizer kind of mindset, right? And then when I turned 18, 19, I was in college and had a little bit more freedom, very much male privilege in my family. My siblings, my sisters didn't have that similar freedom. I got the opportunity to step away from family. So I could make excuses like, oh, I have friends, or I have, obligations with my fraternity that I was part of. So I snuck away to my very first Pride. Y'all, I was cheated. Okay. So here I am, sitting
Angela knows what you're talking about. She's shaking her head.
right. Everybody, folks are nodding. I'm sitting there, and hour one goes by. And so we're now in hour two, and I'm just sitting there like, seriously? Like, if I see one more politician or one more church, like, I mean, I was brought up Christian, but later converted to Buddhism. But I was like, what is going on? And our colonizers are the ones who are marching in this pride parade. I was so disappointed and so sad. Like, that was my awakening about the corporatization or the rainbow capitalism of pride, right? So that was one particular experience. Much later in life, as I'm getting ready to leave Chicago to come to California for this role at another campus prior to San Bernardino, I was invited to participate in the Dyke March. And you saw the Dyke March in Toronto, and the Dyke March opened my eyes. It was like this. And, that's when I learned about the activism within the trans community, and Marsha P. Johnson, Sylvia Rivera, Miss Major, Stonewall Inn riots, and how Pride really started as a resistance, as a form of resistance, right? And what it's turned into this very capitalist, very, it's that danger of that single story. If any of you have heard of that podcast, or that TED Talk, and it's that single story narrative of our oppressors telling our own stories. Later on in life, I lived in South Korea, which at that time was still very not safe for LGBTQ folks to come into their identities and openly talk. I had to hide about my personal life and experiences while I lived there. Their neighborhoods did exist where the Korean community and the international foreign community thrived in like very hidden basement parties and drag shows and whatnot. And within the last, I can't believe it's been 10 years since I've left Korea, but within the last 10 years, we saw a growth of pride and commodification of pride in South Korea as well. I think within the last 5 years, I've started noticing Korean beer companies and Korean, entrepreneurs capitalizing on pride with rainbow capitalism, right? Buy our rainbow colored beer can, buy this t-shirt and lanyard. And it's just, it's wild. And I've even noticed it slowly creep. And now this is where my students called me like an old timer. And so, nothing against age, but on campuses, you see bookstores, right? So when I was at Fullerton, Cal State Fullerton, the bookstore right around Pride, right around the end of the academic year, had a ton of rainbow, right? And again, very focused on the non-trans experience, right? On the LGB experience. And so the entire LGBT center, all the students had bought all the rainbow lanyards and they were really proud. Well, when they walked into my office, I was like, interesting that you're participating in rainbow capitalism. They're like, Jacob, just let us have this win. And I was like, hey, that's how it starts. And so I see some nodding. So those are kind of like my experiences in terms of pride as I've come into spaces, disappointments and letdowns, especially the corporatization. It even kind of slowly touches on my dissertation topic. I look at the corporatization of higher education, especially through internationalization, but I could see the comparativeness or the similarity with pride and homo nationalism, as I was mentioning. And we'll go into this after my colleagues share, but very, very important about sharing about the pinkwashing and the rainbow tourism of Israel and Tel Aviv, right? When in fact you have the colonization and land grabbing of indigenous Palestinians very present today, very cognizant today, as we see what is happening and the murder of Palestinian folks and the attacks on Palestinian Muslims as they are preparing to finish up Ramadan, right, and celebrating Eid. It's very present.
As we speak, it is happening.
As we speak.
Yeah.
Right, and oftentimes it's shared as a religious conflict when it is not, right? There are Palestinian Jews, Christians, very, very much present and very much cognizant of the kind of pinkwashing that is constantly happening and how students in particular, like groups on college campuses like Students for Justice in Palestine, try to exist but are often silenced, policed through so-called activists, right? Just wanted to share. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Jacob. Who's going to go next? Angela, you want to go? We'll save the best for last, Eloy.
You want to go, Eloy? Go. You can go for it.
Yeah, thank you, Angela. So hi, everyone. My name is Eloy Garcia. I'm a student here at Cal State San Bernardino, and I'm the current president of the Pride Pack, which is an LGBTQ student organization that we just started last winter. So this is such a wonderful movie, and it talks about so many different topics in just an hour, right? So we have a lot that we can talk about. I do see a question here. Asher is asking about, the whitewashing, revisionist history, and the establishment within the community. And the question is, how do those of us living in gray spaces talk to those within our communities that internalize and perform cis heteronormativity and cis homonormativity? I think it's a really good question. And I think a big part of that is the proximity to heterosexuality is praised, right? It's praised and it's rewarded. So as like the conversation about marriage equality, quote unquote equality, was, well, now you have access to all of this other infrastructure that allows you to organize your family, that allows you to organize your income, and even create generational wealth that we weren't able to do potentially before or in the same ways. And instead of like having this conversation about how we can make, insurance and healthcare more accessible to people who aren't seeking those very heteronormative relationships, we just make space for people who assimilate to those relationships. And I think a really interesting part of marriage and LGBTQ marriage is still the focus on procreation, still the focus on wanting to create a family. And well, now we can be a family. It's like, because you have kids, because I can adopt now, because we have access to IVF, which is incredibly expensive. So to answer your question, Asher, or to kind of problematize it a bit, is I would recommend to bring up in these conversations that not everyone is seeking that nuclear family. You know, family looks different for everyone. Not every relationship wants to have children, wants to adopt, wants to have IVF, and that's okay, because it shouldn't be up to us as the queer people to recreate these families just so we could be accepted and have access to the infrastructure that really just helps and insulates people with privilege already, whether that's financial privilege, ethnic privilege. It just insulates us more. And I think it separates us from the grander issues of the community. So I think it was really interesting. So the statement of the needs of the community is like, it's not equal to gay marriage. Like, who said that was the end all be all,
Yeah.
right?
Thank you. That's great.
Oh, I'm raring to go. You ready?
Go ahead, Angela. I know you are.
Thank you. It's been really amazing.
But save some room for questions out, because I've got a couple myself. So go ahead.
Great. No, I really enjoyed the comments so far. I'm really appreciating people's personal experiences and attending to the questions we have here. I think I have so much to say about this. The first thing I'm going to say is I teach a class on queer theory where we talk about this very explicitly. A lot of these issues that we're bringing up resonate with what we do in this class. So just kind of a plug for the class, it's GSS 4500. And so anyway, we talk about this kind of stuff, and it's really important to, I want to contextualize, okay? I think a lot of what happens in mainstream media is a focus on assimilation politics to say that people who are gay, lesbian, trans, queer, bisexual, asexual, intersex, right? That we're just like you, and that all we want is our piece of the pie, and that we're willing to come in and do everything that we need to get that, right? And there are certainly people who are like that, and that correlates to privilege, right? That correlates to white skin, it correlates to straight acting, it correlates to cisnormativity, right? It correlates to ideas of if your idea of kinship aligns with the nuclear family, right? And queer, activism and queer theory is saying, that assimilation like that is violence, and we are looking for liberation. And so, yes, we seek to change the mainstream ideas about kinship, about what love means, about how the state regulates our sexuality and our gender, right? Through all kinds of ways, through the family, through IDs, through bathrooms, right? These are just the beginning. So when we're talking about liberation, we're talking about solidarity. We're talking about the idea that gay people, we're not a monolith, that there are so many assorted experiences within our community that it's part of our job to start thinking about that. This movie brings up the idea of gay Palestinians, right? Something where we're phrasing things in this way where it's like, well, we're actually all about trying to liberate them. When the truth is they experience police violence, period, right? That it specifically what is happening is this continuation of white supremacist, capitalist, kind of patriarchal ideas about how to bring justice. So I know that's a lot, right here in the beginning. So that's kind of what I'm really interested in trying to focus on, is why it's important to know about homonormativity, homo-nationalism, rainbow capitalism, pinkwashing, that these are, that maybe when you first come out, it feels really good to finally resist some of these homonormative, really oppressive ways that we have experienced our spiritual life, our family life, our social life, political life. But that the way that we work in solidarity is to start to recognize how very broad our community is, So the idea of having police like lead a pride march that's insulting and violent to a huge part of our community. It is, people go, well, there are gay police. And it's like, well, yeah, just like all police, they need to quit their jobs. And they need to, we need that money to go to schools and to healthcare and uplifting communities. So there is, in a way, I am kind of attending to Jeremy's question about this idea of solidarity. Solidarity means that recognizing that although you're oppressed in a particular way, that doesn't mean that you are not privileged in other ways. And we need this kind of intersectional analysis. If I focused only on my queerness and my gender nonconformity, then I would miss a whole lot about how even heterosexual Black folks, like for example, heterosexual Black women experience gender violence, right? And gender oppression, right? And so that these are things that we find in league with each other, as opposed to, I guess, as opposed to just trying to assert this kind of atomization that people wouldn't understand. I don't know, I feel like I'm losing steam now and just being very vague. But yeah, I love this film. I love to show it in class. The piece about marriage equality is really important to me because it does connect to the idea of, we're just like you. We want to have a family. We want to buy the house and the picket fence, and we will call the police if we see someone weird around our house and around our kids and around our picket fence. And that any kind of solidarity we have is to recognize that, and that it's not only national, but international. People are saying, there's all this stuff going around on like Twitter about how the tear gas that's used against Palestinians is the exact same tear gas that's used against Black Lives Matter protesters. That's solidarity. Okay, so I talked a lot and I'm gonna mute myself.
I think I'll add, again, parts about solidarity is really for those, we all hold privilege in some way, shape, or form, and it's how we use that privilege to either bring up the communities or amplify the voices of the communities that we are trying to support without overpowering or over-engaging. So I'll give an example, and I know a lot of folks are always mad at me when they ask about any sort of ally training, right? And so I am very, very strongly opposed to the sticker type ally training, right? Who are you to come to a 2-hour or a half day or a full day training about my lived experience, and at the end of the day get to walk away with a sticker that you get to either put on your door or an office area that I don't know if everybody in that office is supportive of my community, or you put it on your syllabus or your email signature, right? Especially with the LGBTQ plus and or undocumented community, right? Because legislation of our peoples in this country is so frequently impacted by elections and impacted by the federal and state governments and policed and surveilled, right? As an ally, you have to constantly be in the know of what is happening. So as I'm developing, I mean, yes, we'll have an ally training. We'll figure it out. But the kind of ally training that we'll bring as we bring on our new coordinator for the QTRC is one where allies will have to constantly stay abreast of the knowledge so that they can adequately support the students if that is their true intention, right? There's legislation now that passed the House that's moved on to the Senate or moving on to the Senate in the United States on the Equality Act, on the discrimination of LGBTQ folks. I'll put a link for the Congress bill version in the language here. So please follow it, right? See how far it goes. And I know there's going to be live, if they're live and available, transcripts available for this bill. And I know several folks in DC within my own community, my own queer and trans Malayali community, who are lawyers who are advocating for this piece. So I'll share that. There is a question/comment about exclusivity, especially within the LGBTQ plus community. And as someone who holds various identities, I don't fit in anywhere. Like, so when I was, I'm South Indian, South Asian for most folks, racialized as Black in some countries and some spaces, have adjacent experiences to cis Black men, but I don't identify as Black, I'm South Asian, queer, right? And so within my own community of South Asian, I'm too American. So, I identify with the 1.5 generation within my community, as I was born and I have very, very powerful experiences and memories of growing up in India, but a lot of my life has been transformed in the United States. Right? So I'm stuck in the middle. So I identify with both 1.5. I'm too Indian to be American. I'm too American to be Indian. And within the queer community, it's even worse, right? And I think within the queer community, there's such colorism, fat phobia, racism within the community, let alone talking about asexuality community, the ace community. Often folks don't even consider the ace community as part of the LGBTQ plus narrative, but I will tell you that the A in LGBTQIA on our campus and in our work is ace inclusive, and it's not ally, right? And that's the narrative that many of us educators are doing to kind of work that narrative, correct that narrative, and inform that narrative, especially as more and more ACE research is becoming available, and more and more folks are coming and sharing their identity with the ACE experience, with the LGBTQ plus centers and spaces. So I want to say absolutely correct to the person who shared. There is a lot of exclusivity even within this own community, right? And similarly, in my own lived experiences and the various identities I hold, there's always tensions that I have with being too dark, right? Colorism was very impactful as a product of colonization, upholding white supremacy. Now I'm rambling.
Well, I was just going to, first of all, I wanted to ask you if you could enlighten us a little bit about ACE. And so, but I'm getting back to this question again about exclusivity. My first reaction, and maybe you can comment on this, Eloy. My first reaction is to interpret exclusivity as, on one side, someone sees exclusivity, but I see segregation, right? Because African Americans have always been blamed for being victimized. Why are you people all living in the same neighborhood? Why are you people all sitting at the table together in school? And so I'm not sure if that idea of members of the GLBTQ community living exclusively or wanting to be with one another exclusively is not just segregation.
Yeah, that's a really good question. And I want to answer this question and the other half of the question that was in the Q&A. So like you, I do agree with that connection, right? I think exclusivity is also really related to elitism. If we even look at the commercials that we were shown in this movie about the pink washing, you can look at the bodies that are being shown, right? So thin, athletic looking, white skin, in a fancy hotel or in a fancy restaurant or at the pool. So very leisurely.
Normal, right?
I have all this extra time. I'm going on vacation. So it's directed at very particular communities and very particular people whose status in society they know. They don't have to question, and they can go about kind of everywhere, right? And that, I think, speaks to the exclusivity, because again, the people in the community that do not fit those categories, I don't want to say stereotypes, but those categories do not fit that, don't see themselves there, and then probably therefore won't go, right? So part of the reason, as it pertains to your question, part of the reason why some communities will, and I'll use this term, I guess, self-segregate, right? Is because we gravitate to the places where we do see ourselves. We gravitate to the places where we don't have to explain our existence, where we don't have someone that is not of our identity telling us about our own lives, telling us who we are, why we are or we aren't, and how we should deal with it. So I don't necessarily think that it's an issue, right? I think, again, like you're saying, why are we being scrutinized for gravitating towards our communities where we can exist peacefully and happily, right?
And
Because,
safely. And
and
safe.
safely,
Sometimes it's
absolutely,
just a matter of safety. You know,
absolutely.
I don't want to be in a bar, you know, with my partner if everyone else in there is judging me and maybe going to do me harm. I
Yes.
mean, I would think.
Absolutely. I think it's for a lot of us, it's an illusion. That safety is an illusion. For a lot of people who do fit those categories, it's not. They're able to go move freely, undisturbed. But for a lot of people, it is an illusion, and not all of us are willing to risk primarily our
Yes.
safety. Right. The other half
Yes.
of that question that I do want to talk about as well is
Please.
instead of blaming heterosexuals or heteronormativity, you know, why don't you talk about the issues that you have within your community? And I want to reframe. It's not about blame. It's about accountability. And the reason why it focuses on heteronormativity and homonormativity is because that's the dominant system that's being imposed upon us, right? That's the dominant system that we all have to deal with. Like Kim said, it's heterosexuality. It's not even working for the heterosexuals. Why are you imposing it on everyone, right? So I do want to reframe that. The other part is, as an LGBTQIA plus community, we're not immune to dominant ideology. We are not immune to anything that heterosexuals are dealing with as well. So while we may recreate these stratified structures, these hierarchies within our community, that's what this conversation is about. It's about dismantling those hierarchies in our community, but also putting accountability on why we're exposed to it and why we end up recreating those hierarchies. And it's because heterosexuality, heteronormativity, homonormativity is imposed on everyone.
Right. And you know, you just quoted something, Eloy, that was in the film that I actually wrote down, and I was going to ask about it. Why is heterosexuality failing? You just said it. You just said it. It sounded like you agreed with it, and I want to know why.
My hand right now. So
or can I turn in my heterosexual card right now?
We'll take it right over here.
We'll take it.
I'll swipe it in for you.
Yeah, we'll throw it in a fire. We'll burn it and give you a new gay card. We'll get a gay card.
I'll take it. I'll take it.
I have I'm sure my colleagues have other stuff to say, but I do have a thing. Well, okay, now I can't make words. I do have a response to that question. And that is, you know, if this like, I can speak specifically to this idea of like heteronormativity and like marriage. So some people look at this idea of a rising rates of divorce as some kind of harbinger of badness. It's not good, right? Where some people might actually see it as, you know, well, good, people in bad situations, like say an abusive situation, it's become more socially acceptable for them to escape that, right? Or if it's just a mutually bad situation, like we loved each other before, we don't love each other now, we can make other kinds of families. So, you know, the trend that's been sort of happening is this idea of, you know, people aren't going to see you as immature or somehow less than, or somehow like not getting your life together if you're not married, right? That there's plenty of people who are choosing all different kinds of forms of kinship. And it's important to note that this idea of kind of the nuclear family hasn't always existed. It is very much a product of capitalism and specifically white supremacy. So this idea of a heteronormative family that's filled, you know, that's producing more white children who will go on and like get jobs and join the military and be good little citizens and pay their taxes, right? We're starting to be able to have some space around that and to see that, you know, not every kind of family, not every form of family has to uphold these certain ideals, and that it's actually pretty revolutionary to start thinking about family in different ways. maybe if we're able to economically, say single women, right? If they're able to economically support themselves and make family in their own ways, then good, right? What about this single idea of what family means? Why is it so threatening to our power structure that people are able to make other decisions about how they do family? Honestly, I would love to put my best friend on my insurance, right? I would love, I've already talked with my best friend about doing like a will, things with the will and end of life stuff, right? Or inheritance or something, right? That it's, the trend in history is not for everybody to reach like the age, I don't know, 20 and then get married right away and then try to buy a house and then try to have kids and then get a dog and then, like do all the things in this kind of like, like a destiny is set out for you. And so just at least at the marriage piece, we can see that now people have a lot more options, my single friends or me, I'm unattached right now. I don't get a lot of, a lot of crap from it where people are like, oh, what's wrong with you? Or aren't you so sad? And I'm like, I'm doing great. You know what I mean? Like that there's other ways of being. And so that's just I'm thinking of coupledom and like kind of the marriage piece, but I'm sure my colleagues can point to other things about other aspects of like kind of questioning that heteronormativity.
Good,
I
thank
think
you.
Eurocentric ways of being and Eurocentric ways of understanding what is life, what is family, what is religion. I know religion was asked, right? Are seen as the quote unquote norm. And I'm going to get in lots of trouble here, but whatever. This is my job, right? The Associate Director of Diversity and Inclusion. So you take, for example, India, right? And I have this conversation often, right? India is not real. India was created, right? India was several kingdoms, etc. Caste existed, yes, before European colonization, yes, but in its own ways. But isn't it interesting that as the British colonized India, all of a sudden you have the same system of caste that rate people based off of skin color, right, as a discriminatory policy. That's how race was created. Race was created by European colonists to categorize and count people and keep people quote unquote in place, right? And colonization through religion was often used as forms of control, policing, surveillance, and to step away from what is indigenous, what is the norm, what was taught, and queer love and multiple gender identity as understood as on a spectrum was accepted by various cultures, various indigenous cultures, but were then after post-colonization were equated to subaltern or subnorm, right? And so you think about the various forms of colonization through education, right? Literally the Indian boarding schools in the United States as an example, to literally beat the Indian out of indigenous communities here in the United States. And a lot of those communities are having to relearn their ways of life, right? So you have such, religions set up as a way, as a form of control, personal belief, and many belief of many people, and governments of Western powers put in place in different countries as forms of control to uphold white supremacy, right? And this permeates the LGBTQ community to, again, as a form of control, I would say.
Yeah, I haven't forgotten about the ACE.
Yes, so I provided some resources for folks to look into. ACE, but ACE in particular is a community that doesn't feel sexual attraction, and there's much more information. I don't identify as ACE, so I don't want to misrepresent the community. So I provided some resource. I'll even plug, as we're getting ready for the new academic year, our center hosts programs with the ACE community, so you're welcome to come and learn more. But I don't want to speak for a community.
Yes, I know we have a professor in sociology a first for us, who is heavily into ACE research and is doing a fantastic job in publishing and all that. So
Yeah, Megan Carroll.
yes, Megan Carroll. Yeah,
Carroll.
Megan Carroll. She is she's a powerhouse. Eloy, did you want to, because we're going to have to shut you guys down, unfortunately. I could talk to you guys all day. Did you want to, do you have any closing remarks?
Yes, thank you so much, Mary. So we do have some questions about religion here, and I'll keep it as succinct as I can. And I do want to talk about that a bit. So I was raised in a very Catholic home, right? So I was closeted until I was 18.
Guilty.
and came out after I was an adult for a number of reasons. But what I do want to say about religion and heterosexuality connected, and kind of why, like we had used that word, it's failing, right? Is, well, something that religion does a lot, something that the Catholic religion does a lot, is it controls women's bodies insanely, right? Without putting any type of that focus on men's bodies. And it controls women's bodies through social monitoring within parishes, within the church and communities, and through shame, because it's, again, rooted in procreation, right? So the best way to recruit Catholics is to have more Catholics. So,
yes.
So women's bodies are controlled so much within the church, and it relegates them to only focus on one thing, which is maintaining purity, or the concept of purity, which is essentially false. And if you don't, then you kind of lose your status and you become a pariah, you become someone to be pitied. And it's like all of your existence is based on what you can do, not only for the community, but for your man, right? And the community and the male is what determines your place in the society. So as it pertains to religion, as it pertains to heteronormativity and LGBTQ plus people, there are LGBTQ plus people who are religious. That's completely fine. I'm not here to shame anyone. However, I do encourage us to problematize those notions when we are in those spaces, and recognize and realize that acknowledge that the controlling of anyone's body is not okay. And autonomy should always be given freely, and not something that needs to be earned and or maintained.
Right. You know, I used to read these, for a class I was teaching, read these sodomy laws. And the first question students always ask is, how do they know? Do people go out with a sign saying, you know, I have done this in the privacy of my own bedroom or wherever? You know, it is crazy making the kinds, I mean, we see this rhetoric going on in Washington, D.C. now, you know, trying to say that the rioters on January 6th were not really rioters. They were just like people who were taking a tour of the, you know, it makes you crazy. It makes you crazy. I do want to read very quickly a comment by, let's see, there was a really sweet comment by someone. Did you all see it? All of a sudden it's gone. It was just someone and a couple of people. Oh, here it is. As an ace person, I find it difficult to attend Pride because it's over-sexualized like many Pride events. I see you all nodding your heads. We covered religion, but I did see one comment, and it was taken off, but you know, just someone saying how much they enjoyed this presentation, and I have to concur. We are in almost a year in this series, and we have covered GLBT issues in the past, but this, I think, this film and your commentary, your expert commentary, has just been remarkable, and I just want to thank you all for it.